And that's I think, a one-time good use of contingency because of the critical role it plays in the organization. Now, as we move forward with making various plans or proposals to you, when January rolls around and the incumbent retires, the sick time runs out and they retire, then you have a choice. We could either keep the person as a deputy treasurer, because we won't need a temporary deputy treasurer, or we'll have laid out the case in more detail of how we'd like to create a finance department and what the mechanisms of that are, and you can create that. At that time, we would, we still need somebody today. And I think that's the message I'd like you to take from for WM3, is that there's a hole in our organization in a very critical area that needs to be filled.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes, Justin, on page 10 of your thing, under time and attendance, could you explain paragraph 3 to me? It says a current withholding statement is $57,000. And
Yes.
then we're going to do a one-time of 56, then our total cost is going to be 105. Can you explain how we're
Yes.
adding these numbers up? So
Yes. I mentioned previously that we hire somebody to do our payroll checks and our withholding statement, so our W-2s and that. There might be a couple other little pieces to that, but that's the bulk of what that work is. That contract is for $57,000 a year. When we met with them to look at their time and attendance add-on, they told us that there'd be a one-time setup fee of $31,000 and that the contract was going to be about $75,000 a year to do that. So we didn't meet with them too frequently after that, and we then met with them a few more times, and we negotiated a much better deal. And what we negotiated was that one-time setup fee of $31,000, we negotiated down to zero. And we negotiated the annual fee for the time and attendance system to $56,000. On top of that, they agreed to give us a $10,000 concession on our existing contract. So the $105,000 would be the $57,000 that we currently pay, plus about another $50,000 for the time and attendance system. So that would be an increase in terms of payroll, increase of our payroll costs of about $2,100, $2,150 per pay period for our entire payroll system to be automated.
Mr. Petras.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I think Mr. Bennett might have had a follow-up question.
So currently, we're paying $57,000 to them to do basically time and attendance manually.
No, we're paying our staff throughout the organization to do time and attendance manually, and we're paying them $57,000 a year to write the checks and to do the tax reporting on our payroll.
So hopefully this will free our staff then to do more needed work in their departments and stuff.
I do believe that this will allow us to look at realigning resources that are dedicated to payroll in other areas.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Petras.
So to keep you on your toes here, Justin, I want to bounce back to Ways and Means 3.
Sure.
Good. So just for my own clarification, that is creating, because it's creating the position that already exists, deputy treasurer exists right now, right? But it's creating a temporary position at the same salary grade, is that correct?
The currently graded at an 8. So there's a history here that we went over at Ways and Means.
Right, I just want to make sure that there's no...
There's not an increase in terms of budget. There is a proposed increase in terms of grade. So, and let me explain that. When they graded the position, they proposed it to be graded at grade 11. At that time, the legislature graded it at an 8, but paid it closer to a 12. So the salary that's paid, and right now, it's a bifurcated salary. So the base salary, I think, is 68 or 72, and then there's another 18,000 or roughly. It comes out to about $92,000 that the incumbent is paid. And that was done because there was an attempt to recruit him to another place, and they brought the salary in line with the market without regrading the position. And they didn't do it, in my opinion, in the way I would have proposed doing it, but I wasn't here. So what I'm trying to do is keep the same salary range for the position and grade the position appropriately for both the current work and in line with where it might go in the future. But the request to grade it based on the salary doesn't increase the budget impact, right? So it actually brings the grade in line with what we're already spending.
So I guess what I'm just looking at, and I understand conceptually what you're saying, but there's no additional, just so I understand, there's no additional expenditure between now and, this operating budget. And is there?
Yes. So the salary that we would pay between now and the end of the year would come out of contingency, because this is an unbudgeted, unplanned occurrence. And we budgeted in contingency for this year $210,000 in the budget. Our contingency account, as of the end of May, including the salary sweeps, deducting out any spending from contingency, is presently $250,000. So our contingency is in a place where it can absorb this, and this is an appropriate, in my opinion, an appropriate use of contingency to create this deputy position, the temporary position. The current position is vacant on leave, so it's being
Right.
paid.
Would you want to pay more than what you're?
I want to pay comparable based on what the market determines we need to get the qualified person into the position.
Mr. Batman?
Yeah, I think if I can go back to this, I think we can discuss, I'll have questions on Ways and Means 3 as well when that comes up. But I just want to clarify, my assumption with this is that we're not supposed to sit here and digest it and ask all the questions that we have. My assumption is we're not going to get a proposal in the next month based upon the fact that we've received this, but whether we take it, we read it, we digest it, we send questions, and then when the proposals come forward, the proposals will be much more fleshed out. We'll attempt to address some of the issues we talked about tonight, other issues and so on. Is that's true?
Yes, I didn't expect to be able to digest everything, giving it, but I did want to include it as part of my report because it was something that had been asked of me and something
Yeah.
that I've been working with the staff on.
Yeah, and I for one appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dennison?
And I agree, and I just want to say, let's remember, there'll be $75,000 more in next year's budget because we had to pay for the CGI report, right? Obviously.
There was, you paid for the CGR report in 2017. There was a Phase
Okay.
2 that was
Okay.
budgeted in 2018 that I'm not sure, I'm not sure I would spend on that. I think that there may be other smaller pieces that we could use consulting for. For example, it may be beneficial to bring in somebody in addition to a purchasing agent. It may be beneficial to bring somebody in who's skillful as a consultant, helping us set up and evaluate our purchasing operations. I don't think that would be $75,000, but that might be a small use of money budgeted. Your point that 75 wouldn't be budgeted in 2019 is accurate.
But I thought that's all we spent was $75,000.
You spent 75 in 2017, and you budgeted another 75 in 2018, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Batman?
I think that's right. It was not spent.
I don't remember budgeting another $75,000 in 2018.
That was budgeted as a Phase 2.
That we agreed not to do Phase 2. Anyways, the bottom line is if we don't do some of these things, and hopefully they work out, we wasted $75,000 to start with.
Any other questions for the administrator? Mr. Whitman?
I just got one comment on the CGR report. We spent $75,000. That's already gone. Now we're spending a lot more money to make new hires in new positions and new ideas. This CGR report, I'm having a hard time seeing savings. I mean, hopefully they'll be there in the future, but right now, all it's doing, it's got us spending money if we follow it. Having a hard time swallowing the pill here, but that's just me.
Mr. Lattimore?
Well, Mr. Mahonik, you've been on this board as long as I have, and you know we've worked hard to try to reduce our spending, nursing homes, home health aides, other things that we've done to reduce. I'd like to still see the savings, what we did in the past in regards to our spend, our investment going forward, is that whether or not that's gonna have the same return as what we've done. I know we've worked hard in the past, so I'd like to see what happens after we make a decision on this board financially.
Mr. Foley?
Yeah, it's just important to note from the CGI report, it wasn't all savings oriented. It was also to create the effect of efficiency within our county and the best way to go forward with those. And so from that perspective, if we start implementing some of the ideas that Justin's bringing forward from that report, we might become more efficient, but not necessarily see savings that we can quantify. So I just want to make sure that's mentioned during this discussion.
Any other questions for the administrator? Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everybody.
All right, for my report, I have a couple things that I want to touch base on. First and foremost, anybody want to address the public hearing? Going once, going twice? All right. So, for my report, first I want to thank Justin, Lynn, and Steve for all their hard work on the shared services meeting. We got a lot of people together and got them in the same room and had some great discussion and got a lot of good information. And I'm hopeful going forward that those conversations are going to continue. I think people saw the value that we can do collectively instead of working in the silos that sometimes we often do. So thank you all for all your hard work in pulling that together, and we'll see what the plan comes out as and move forward. Another thing that yesterday, Justin and I and Fred met with the auditors. So we had a rather pleasant conversation, as pleasant as you can have with auditors, and I think it will shed a lot of light on the whole finance plan department discussion as we move forward. Not to say there's issues, but at least we have a neutral party coming in and looking at it. So they'll be here, what'd they say, 6 months?
No, three to
Three
four.
3 to 4.
The auditors from the state comptroller's office will be here. They're going to have an office, they're going to use the conference room in Fred's office, and they will be here roughly week after the 4th of July for 3 to 4 months.
So have fun with that.
And they said feel free to drop by if you'd like.
So, going back to the April meeting, I did hand out the organizational chart that we had paid someone to come in and do that we all voted on, and then made policy of the role of the chair, of the role of the committee chairs, and the role of the administrator. I just wanted to touch base on that quick, because one of the things that says in there is that one of my duties is to do a periodic review of the rules and boundaries. And I just want to remind everybody that as a body, we supported this, we paid for this study. There was a group of us that met with this consultant, and the outcome was the product that I handed to you in April. So I just wanted to touch base on it again, and just not as, I think it's no secret that when I ran for chair, that I made it very clear that the administrator should be doing his job and the department heads should all have the freedom to do their job, and they report to the administrator. And that's consistent with what that report says. When we were in Albany in January, I talked to a longtime administrator whose name was very prominent, and people spoke very highly of him. And he had been with, I believe it was Wayne County, but I'm not 100% sure. And I was sitting on the bus after we left the governor's mansion, and he said he'd been there for 17 or 18 years. And I said, what's the secret? Because we can't keep people for more than 2 years, 3 years. And he says, leave them alone and let them do their jobs. I said, well, that's not going to happen because we're politicians and we're elected to oversee all of that. He goes, but you got to do it within a framework. So I just want to bring that back to everybody's attention. So as far as my role as the chairman and whoever sits in this seat in the future, our role is we're the legislative spokesperson. We set the agenda for the meeting, and we're the conduit to the administrator. And we intervene when legislators overstep those boundaries that were established by the policy that we all approved and voted for. So that's, I just want that to be out there. As far as the committee chairs, jobs are to run the committee meetings, work with the administrator to support the department budget and goals. The administrator runs day-to-day operations, and feedback, you should be given feedback consistently at the committee meetings. As far as the administrator's job, again, day-to-day operations, he has the 10,000-foot view of the county, sometimes as the elected officials. I know I have the southeast corner of Auburn, and that's what I focus on, and I'm not really concerned, well, I shouldn't say concerned. Cato and Ira, I don't have that knowledge, so when decisions are made, we have to rely on our administrator and our department heads who have all that information to bring us thoughtful ideas and proposals. And that's, the other part of it is to evaluate proposals from the department heads and bring ideas forward to us to look at and see if we want to fund and support, much like the priority list that Justin just shared with us. One thing that has come up and will continue to come up, the administrator cannot make or change policy. That lies with our body only. So he can suggest changes, but we have to vote on that, so there is no way that the administrator, no matter who's sitting in these two chairs, is going to be able to change policy without 15 legislators or however many legislators we have going forward. And to monitor the budget and basically, again, run day-to-day operations and keep us on the right track. So I just wanted to touch base on that because there's always a lot of conversation, and I know change is tough, and there's been a different role for past chairpersons and my role, but I think I was very clear when I first came on in January. So that being said, the last thing that I want to touch on is the Board of Trustees appointments, which will be coming up next. This is really just a house cleaning issue. We had somehow thought that the terms were 6-year terms. They're actually 7-year terms, and on the resolution, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, it had an end date of 2018, but that was not 7 years because they were appointed in 2012, so these two individuals have till 2019 to fulfill their term.
Right, and this proposal anticipates fixing that, and they would have to sign the oath of office, assuming it moves forward. Yeah. But their terms do expire in 19.
Okay. So that is what I have for my report, unless anybody has any questions. And Mr. Lattimore.
Mr. Chairman, you brought up the board of the college, and, there was some healthy discussion between board members. Because of past administrators at the college, there were some financial issues and some directive issues. Hopefully, they'll be straightened out under the new leadership.
I feel very confident in the leadership at the college at this point.
Right. But I mean,
It being a
sometimes-
trustee member.
Sometimes administrators do go off the rails. Is that not true?
Sometimes legislators go off the rails.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen here, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dennison.
How, just out of curiosity, did the appointments get screwed up? And did you once that was found, did you make sure other ones are right for the future?
I can address that.
Yep, go ahead, Fred.
We don't know how it occurred. Sheila Min and I spent time going back to 1998 to make sure that all of the 5 legislative appointments were in order. This came as a surprise to us this morning, and it turns out that it was just 2. These 2 that you see before you, the terms are statutory. For whatever reason, the appointment ended in 18, it should have ended in 19, and this is just to clean this up.
So somehow it was your fault,
It's
Fred.
always my fault.
Yeah, he was here then.
Mr. Lattimore.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to goals that this board wants to see, I know that broadband was one of yours, it's one of mine, it's one of Mr. Batman's. Hopefully that putting the pipe in the ground and the wire in the ground is going to go forward to bring this community and this county into this century. And I'd like to know whether or not we have any more goals than that as a body. I mean, restructuring the finance department's nice, but we've got to have a higher goal, I think, like broadband.
Yeah, and I think that Mr. Woods in his report did acknowledge that there was a very positive meeting for broadband yesterday, and I think that those issues have all been resolved, and hopefully we can put that one to rest and move on to bigger and better things.
Well, we know that the town of Moravia runs very well. They've got 5 miles of pipe in the ground. That's what I like to hear, progress.
Summer.
Somerville.
And we're looking at, what, 110 miles of county roads? That I think that we solved that issue yesterday afternoon.
Let's hope
So,
so.
so, any other questions for me? All right, appointments.
College Board of Trustees, John Camardo, 12 Tubman Lane, Auburn, New York, term 7/1/18 to 6/30/19. Stephanie Hutchinson, 28 Grover Street, Auburn, New York, term 7/1/18 to 6/30/19.
Move 'em.
Second.
Mr. Dennison and Mr. Bennett, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? All right, communications and announcements. Do I have a motion to waive the reading of the communications and announcements?
Second.
Mr. Pinckney, Mr. Bennett, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. And we will get right into Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ways and Means had 11 resolutions. Let's see, 8 of them were passed through committee. I'd like to offer up Ways and Means 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10 as a bundle. If there's any question or thing, I'd like them separated.
So we have 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Not 9.
Need to do 1A, 1B?
Not 10's a 2/3.
No, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Would anybody would like those separated? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried.
Ways and Means 3 was amended at resolution, and we've had the discussion on it, and it requires a 2/3 vote.
A motion on Ways and Means 3. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Mr. Batman?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm fully in support of this. I agree with exactly everything Justin said in terms of this isn't about a finance department. This is about the fact that we have a critical position that's open, and it has to be filled. I do want to point out, though, that this is a contingency issue. It's why we have a contingency account. I've said this before, but I just want to say it again and again and again. Our budget is built on an assumption that we will sweep salary, that we will save money, before the end of the year. That's why we build a budget that has a quote-unquote deficit, but at the end of the year, we don't. So we cannot look at money we've saved during the year as money available to spend. And so that should never be a justification for spending money, because it's not the way our budget's built. But I want to also be clear, having said that, we have to move this forward because we have a critical need. And again, that's why there's a contingent account. If there weren't, it would have to come from fund balance, because it has to be done. So I just want to make that clarity. Thank you.
Mr. Whitman?
This resolution is currently at a grade 11, correct?
Correct.
I would like to make an amendment to make it a grade 12.
I'll second it.
All right, we have an amendment to put it back to a grade 12. Any discussion on the amendment? Go ahead, Mr. Batman.
I guess I would like to understand why, because it's my understanding that if we go with the finance department, that position will have to be graded based upon that total department and what it's going to do. This position was graded at 11, and we heard the reasons that it was actually made an 8, whenever that was, and paid extra. But the point is the position we're filling is the position that is currently filled, which was graded at an 11. To move it to a 12 anticipates future responsibilities that have not been defined, and it just seems a mistake, since what we're trying to do here is get through this year. Give us time to analyze what we need to do, look at a proposal for finance department and move forward with that. That's our goal. And I don't understand why we would make it a 12 when the work is an 11.
Mr. Whitman?
What direction we take there, I don't know what it's gonna be. My thought is, it's a lesson we've learned over and over again, is you get what you pay for. I'd like to find some decent candidates that, depending on the route we take in the future, maybe we can utilize that candidate or not, that's in that position. You know, we've proven time and time again, we underpay our employees, and some of their performance shows it. I'd like to get a good candidate. It's an important position.
Mr. Lattimore?
Yeah, training, you know, some of these positions we've got to upgrade because the cost of training new people far exceeds the increase in the pay.
Mr. Dennison?
I'd just like to look at how we do our grading, because this is something that we shouldn't have to talk this much about. And I mean, the grid and all this, I've about had enough of it the last 2.5 years. Why did we have some that were graded at an 11, but we decided to pay them at an 8? So now we're balking at an 11. I mean, it's just,
I believe the original resolution had this graded as a 12, and
Yeah.
at Ways and Means it was moved to an 11.
that's
Mr.
the
Petrus?
point. We're all over.
So is that, maybe Mr. Russell can, so is it graded at, is what Mr. Patrick's getting right now, is he graded at an 11 or a 12?
8.
He's graded at an 8, but he's being paid at a grade 12. So what, and when they did the grade analysis at that time, they graded it an 11. When we sought to fill this position, we looked at the duties, we looked at the skill level and the requirement for those duties, and it graded at a 12. In part because we knew that we were never going to hire somebody with an associate's degree. So we upgraded the qualifications. The qualifications are minimum bachelor, master's preferred, CPA preferred. What we are trying to do is align this, and I agree with everything Mr. Batman said, that we are trying to fill this for the current need. And while I'm showing you my plan going forward, because that's what was requested of me, asking this be a 12 is not part of that plan. It's aligning the salary paid with the proper grade so that we can hire at a comparable salary. The city of Auburn just hired a comptroller. They advertised that at $89,000 to $107,000. I'm not saying the deputy treasurer is fully comparable to a comptroller, but I'm saying that gives you an idea of where senior municipal finance officials are being hired. And I want to make sure that we have the freedom and the ability, when we get to evaluating candidates, that Jim can appoint the person he feels best suited and has the best candidates, and pay them enough to recruit them. Because he met with a couple people in anticipation of the vacancy, and, you know, when he told them what he thought the salary was likely to be, they said, yeah, thanks.
So just as a follow-up, this is not for the anticipation of finance director. This is, because what I'm looking at is a median salary for CPAs is up to $75,000, according to, I don't know what it is, Indeed or whatever, it's on here. So, this is to create the position to get us through the end of the year in equivalence with
Yes.
what the existing deputy treasurer.
Exactly. And also, keep in mind, it's a temporary job. So that there's no guarantee that you're a deputy